People often want me to tell them what's the best place to incorporate their business, the best second passport to get, the best country to live in. Today, I'm going to run down all the different best countries that we've chosen for folks over the last year and tell you how to find the best for you. There's an old saying that says in the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the expert's mind there are few. And if I look back to my journey to learn this global citizenship stuff over the last decade and a half, no doubt when I started, I had a lot of ideas in my mind that simply wouldn't work out. Countries where I might have wanted to live, but it would have been very difficult for me to live, either at the time because I couldn't afford it, or because that country didn't have a program, or because it just wouldn't work out. I didn't understand how taxes worked or how whatever else worked. And so the idea in my mind, not only because I run a business that helps people greatly reduce their options and then execute on those, but simply because I believe having too many options doesn't lead us to success, and there's no best option that applies to almost everybody. And so whether you make $100,000 a year as a freelancer, whether you've got a $10 million a year business, or whether you've got a $50 million portfolio, you're going to have different options. You may overlap in some areas, and yet everyone has their own needs. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to go through all the different options that we have presented to people we've worked with over the last year. I'm going to choose places that we've sent at least 2 people to, and I may be missing 1 or 2, but I've pretty much gone through and figured out what have we recommended to someone in their holistic plan at least twice. Maybe I'll give you a little bit of insight into why, and I'm going to show you how there's so many different options that apply to so many different people. If it's your first time here, I'm Andrew Henderson, founder of Nomad Capitalist. We do help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs put together holistic legal plans to offshore their lives, offshore their finances, offshore their businesses, and find more freedom in an unfree world. You can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. So let's talk about where the best place to form a company is. Here are the places that we have used. In the UAE, there are various free zones, and so depending on what kind of business you run, that will dictate the best free zone for you. What also could be dictated is if you want to be in one of the sexy free zones because you want to open an office, you want people to go there, and you want to be kind of near the center of Dubai, that could be valuable. But if you want to save money, you might open your company in a free zone because you're never really going to go to that office, and what do you care if the office is in the middle of nowhere and you can only get there with a car, and the people that you're going to work with maybe don't have a car in Dubai. And so you've got various free zones in the UAE that you could use. And by the way, those free zones for most folks are going to retain the 0% tax rate the UAE is known for. Other folks have chosen to incorporate in Hong Kong. Why? Well, they don't mind having some extra paperwork to do and have an audit. Some of them like the fact that it is tied to China. They think that offers some kind of diversification. Others like the fact that they have potentially more banking options, not necessarily in Hong Kong, but throughout Asia. And so the UAE certainly has a bit of a reputation. It's not necessarily problematic because you have domestic banking. You can use the UAE in part of a global structure, but for folks who wanted more simplistic structures, Hong Kong often worked. That they could just get a bank account that worked. They have their company in Hong Kong. They didn't mind doing some paperwork every year. We've had folks set up companies in the USA. They have workers in the USA. They need payment processing in the USA. Other reasons why they want to be connected to the US, their customers ask for it, right? And so that may be part of a global structure, but people do set up companies in the US, and we've done that. People have set up companies in Malta. You're not going to pay 0% tax in Malta, but you can pay a single-digit tax rate. Why do they do that? Well, in many cases, because they want to live somewhere, primarily in Europe, where the jurisdiction would impose a penalty rate of tax on them if their business was incorporated in a tax haven. And so if you live in a place where your tax rate, where your company being in the UAE would impose a penalty tax rate, then the 0% you pay in the UAE is irrelevant because where you're living, you're going to pay a lot more than you would pay simply setting up in Malta, or a country, another country that's on the so-called whitelist. So people would set up in Malta for that reason. Again, other people would just want to do business in the European Union. Bulgaria was another one on the list. Why? Some people just want the EU. They need to do things like register domains and have certain IP in the EU that having an EU company is beneficial. Some of them had stuff where they just wanted to be able to hire people in that country. They wanted to hire people in Bulgaria because it is the EU and because there were certain protections for the kind of business that they wanted to run. They needed that. And so they didn't want to offshore some of their staff to other places. Not saying you have to have everybody working in the same place as the company is, but for them that structure made sense. Other people set up companies in Panama. In some cases, this was merely for asset protection and just holding assets as part of a state tax planning. In other cases, it was, I wanted to get residence because there still are options under the Panama Friendly Nations visa if you start a company. Not really a lot of active business being done in Panamanian companies, but people are setting up Panamanian companies. British Virgin Islands, BVI, people are setting up companies. Again, zero tax, zero reporting requirements. There are some economic substance requirements, but it's relatively manageable. So for folks who might have looked at Hong Kong but didn't want to do the annual audit paperwork, the BVI worked. We've had folks do it for estate tax planning. We've had folks do it for simple holding companies or stuff in crypto, for active businesses with other parts of the structure. So they have multiple companies in different places. They need a top part of the structure, and so the BVI worked. It was simple. And then people in the Caymans, why? Because they wanted something very sophisticated. They could afford it. They had a high level of company. Again, just like being in a fancy free zone in Dubai versus out in the desert somewhere. The Caymans works if you can afford it. Some of them, one of them wanted to actually move to the Caymans. And so having the company living there, that works to do things like open bank accounts, very high quality banks. Others, again, wanted the prestige. And so you can see, like, people set up companies in different places. By the way, tax treaties were one of the equations. People who are shipping physical products, there's certain requirements. So that's everywhere that people set up a company. I think there were some other ones that one person would set up, but you wouldn't say one person doing something is the best. You would say at least two people setting up in those places for those reasons would make those the best. Let's talk about residence. Mexico, people want freedom. They want a residence permit that doesn't require a large investment or really any investment. They want something that's right next door if they're an American and they can get in. People have been moving to Nicaragua, or they've been getting Nicaragua residence. Why? It has been wide open. It's been a good place as a backup plan. It's a path to a pretty good little-known passport. People have been going to Colombia. Why? High-yield real estate investments. You get permanent residence. You can work towards citizenship. It's a great place to live without the requirement to do so. Bahamas. Just want to live in the Bahamas. Wanted to buy a property, live a tax-free life, kind of get off the grid a little bit in terms of living a more slow-paced life. Georgia. People want residence in Georgia. It is now back to operating the way it should. And so, hey, I wanted to buy property in Georgia. If you bought it 9 to 12 months ago, you made a good deal. That's what's happened so far. So people have gotten residence there. They like it. They like the affordability. Numerous reasons people got residence in Georgia. Residence in Armenia next door. Again, tax benefits for a smaller business in one case. Multiple people just want it as a backup because you can hold the residence and not have to live there generally to maintain it. And so Armenia was interesting. Serbia and Montenegro, people, especially from Australia and New Zealand, getting residence there because it is free. They view it as a place that is free. And for folks who are from Europe or Australia, they view it as closer to home than going all the way over to the Americas. And no doubt it is a little bit easier to get there. So Serbia, you can buy a property, start a company. Montenegro, probably better to start a company unless you want to live there all year long. But people have been getting residence there. Portugal, through numerous different residence programs, including the Golden Visa, both to have the optionality for citizenship in the future or because they wanted to live there and have the tax incentives. It's an increasingly popular place to live. It's becoming a name brand. Austria, folks just like the idea of living in Austria. And it's not necessarily tax friendly, but they're like, hey, I don't want to pay the taxes of Switzerland and the lump sum there, so I'm going to live in Austria. Hey, I'll pay some tax. I think one person was an investor, and so they can use some tax treaties, but that was just a place they wanted to live. Ireland, someplace that I think is a great option as a soft landing for folks. They wanted to speak English. They realized they could reduce their taxes by moving there, and some people like the cool weather, actually. Panama, some people are still getting that residence permit, again, just as a permanent residence or soon-to-be permanent residence that you can have as a place to go that's tax-friendly. Italy, folks that want to live there because they have a lump sum tax regime. The UAE, if you start a company, you can get residence there. We've had a number of younger entrepreneurs who just like the idea of living in Dubai. And so you can get residence, and why not? Tax-friendly. Thailand, Malaysia, people are getting residence in Asian countries. Asia is slowly coming back. And so people are interested in that because, again, they're tax-friendly, great quality of life, more affordable than a place like Dubai or the Cayman Islands. And again, if you're Australian or if you're, it's a lot closer to home. If you're European, it's not that bad. So that's what people are doing. Personal tax. People are paying taxes in many of those countries. And they're not paying taxes in Colombia, for example. So we're telling them, hey, you probably don't want to spend your whole year in Colombia. But certainly the Bahamas, you can live very tax-friendly. We had one family that wanted to live there full-time. They're going to have a zero tax bill because that's what the Bahamas gives them. They're there all the time. Georgia, some folks are taking advantage of the territorial tax system there. Serbia and Montenegro have tax carve-outs that you can use, and we have people who are paying very low rates of tax there. The government's happy to have them. Portugal, the NHR program. Ireland, Panama, Italy, UAE, Thailand, Malaysia, most of these countries have some element of tax friendliness. And so people are paying tax now in many of those countries. They're also bringing money into those countries and helping the countries. Citizenship, we've done all 6 of the main Caribbean citizenship countries, plus Turkey, that's the 6th. And so, which is best? Well, we had a family of 4 that wanted to go with Antigua and Barbuda. It was the most affordable. We had a family of, I think, 7 for St. Kitts and Nevis. Best passport in the Caribbean that's available. And it was the best deal for them because they had a big family. They had all the husband, wife, and kids, and his parents, and her mother, I think. And so they get a great deal because in St. Kitts, it is pretty affordable once you're just adding additional people on. It's not a big chunk. It's just like 10 grand to add those additional folks on. We had single people doing Dominica. We had a couple doing Dominica, even though Antigua would have been cheaper. They said, oh, we don't like that Antigua was more strict during the pandemic. So we did all 5 of those different countries. We've had people who've come and said, hey, I want to do Grenada because I want to give up U.S. citizenship, have access to the E2 program. I said, probably better to get a separate E2 passport. And so we've certainly cleared up some misconceptions with folks. But Turkey, we've had folks who once wanted to invest in property. They either like the idea of it, they like to have a property, as I do, that is at the meeting point of the world, at one of the world's largest airline hubs, where you can pretty much get to anywhere else. And some folks just thought, hey, it's a great investment. Why spend $150,000? I'll get family, or I'll get citizenship for my family for free, basically, right? Because the rental they're going to get, the rental market is booming right now in Istanbul. The rental they're going to get is going to pay the fees, which are more affordable than the Caribbean fees, and they're going to sell the investment in the future. And so they believe that they can do that if they bought the right property, and not potentially, not lose much of anything on their investment. We also had, I think, 9 different citizenship by descent countries. And so whether that was Ireland or Guyana, Ireland is, I think, just getting back to starting to process CBD applications now after a while off, but they weren't all in Europe. 9 different countries where people qualified for citizenship through parents or grandparents or great-grandparents. We've seen Germany, we've seen the UK, we've seen Ireland, we've seen Italy, we've seen Poland, Guyana, and a couple of others. Now, what's the best citizenship by descent? The one you qualify for. We did have someone who I think that they had some ties to somewhere in the Middle East, and I said, that's probably not going to help you out, right? We had somebody who I believe they were entitled to Pakistani citizenship. They were an American. It's like, it's probably not going to really move you any closer. But other than that, the best citizenship by descent is the one that you can qualify for. We also had numerous paper residence countries that people are going and setting up residence in. We're going to be talking about some of those at Nomad Capitalist Live, where you can simply go and put some money in the bank or put some money in bonds or do various other things, and then go like once a year, keep the residence open, and then go and apply for citizenship later. And so we also have folks doing golden visas, which I don't count as a citizenship, but they're working towards citizenship. And so you can see there are other things that we do as well. But for companies, residence, tax home, and citizenship, there's a lot of different places people are going. And again, I've had folks who make millions of dollars a year in the last couple of years say, I want to move to Nicaragua because I want low taxes, I want to be left alone, I want freedom, just get out of my life. You've also had people who just don't have as much money who like the idea of Nicaragua because it's affordable and it gives them the things that they need. You have people who stretch it to move to Dubai and they rent places that are really expensive and they're not saving as much money as someone who lives in Dubai could, but that's okay. You have people who want to live overseas, and again, maybe they make $1 million a year. They're going to go to a place like in Ireland and they're going to have a lot less housing affordability, so they're certainly, again, not going to save as much, but they're going to save on everything else, and so it's still a win for them. So there's no saying like, oh, if you have 50 million, you do this, you do this. We have people with 50, 100, $200 million who get Caribbean citizenship. They're like, I don't need Malta citizenship. By the way, that's the one I missed. We also did Malta citizenship in the last year. There are a number of people who are getting Malta citizenship. And so in some cases, we have people who you would have thought they would have gone with a cheaper option, but they said, no, I want to make an investment in my future. I may only have, $9 million, $10 million, but I'm going to do the Malta program. It's going to cost me $1 million, but then I'm going to be covered, and I have endless options, right? And then again, you have people who have $200 million. Hey, just give me St. Kitts and Nevis. So there's no determining based on how much you have or what your nationality is what's best. Certainly, I can tell you that if you're American going to a country like Georgia or Albania, for example, I think we did one Albanian residence, you're perhaps going to be treated better as an American than if you are a citizen of India, for example, or China. There are some countries that are going to be a bit more focused on that. There's also countries that just aren't going to care. Portugal, I don't think they care. A lot of Western countries don't care. So what's the best? It depends on a ton of factors, and this is what we do here at Nomad Capitalist. When you come and you work with us, we go through and put all the puzzle pieces of your offshore puzzle together because things need to fit together. Your taxes in the U.S. need to match your taxes where you go and live. And if you don't plan both together, you're going to have a problem. Okay? The residence you're relying on, the citizenship you're getting, right? Is that citizenship allowed dual citizenship? Is there a reciprocity agreement? I mean, there's so many questions. This is why we ask people that we work with hundreds of questions to figure out what's the best for them. And sometimes it comes down to 3 or 4 different options, but the goal is to get it down to either we're going to do all 3 or 4, or we're going to explore a couple of them, but focus on one, or we're going to whittle it down to one. And so the way of determining the best is not asking someone for advice based on what they did. It's going through a streamlined process that in our case takes about a month to go through and have people ask you all the right questions, both qualitative and quantitative, to figure out exactly what it is that's best for you.